Ninja Gaiden slashed its way out of Japan and onto your NES back in 1989. Developed and published by Tecmo, Ninja Gaiden for the NES is loosely based on the arcade game released a year prior in 1988. And while the arcade game is heavily based around popular beat-em-ups of the time like Double Dragon and Final Fight, the NES version of Ninja Gaiden saw significant changes on its way to home consoles. Gone was the beat-em-up gameplay style of the arcade, now replaced with something much more in the style of Konami's Castlevania series of games, and sporting a brand new level of difficulty that would see countless controllers thrown across kids' rooms over the years. But were these changes needed in the first place, since the arcade game was already pretty fantastic? Or was this really the start of a now legendary franchise that would go on to see sequels, remakes, and re-releases across multiple consoles over the next few decades? Well, unless you live underneath a rock, then you already know the answer to this one. But for everyone else, go ahead and wrap your shirt around your face and grab your favorite flea market katana, because we're about to see if Ninja Gaiden for the NES can still ninja its way into our hearts. Start up Ninja Gaiden and you'll immediately get to see one of its most celebrated achievements, that being the sheer amount of story and cutscenes being thrown at you when you're not actually playing the game. While most NES games at the time were content with a brief text crawl or just making you read the story in the instruction manual, Ninja Gaiden goes all out with plot and cinematics that would make any bad 1980s anime green with envy. And if you don't skip any of it, the game has over 20 minutes worth of story and cutscenes, which is pretty crazy for just about any game back then. As a kid, I remember being floored by these story section, since it was kind of like I was watching a cartoon along with playing a game I rented. Though I have to admit that playing it for this review and being the miserable adult that I am today, I definitely wanted to move things along, since some of those exposition sections can drag on for seemingly days. It's still a really cool thing to see though, and was actually responsible for showing me that video games could tell a visual story that wasn't limited to a stage select screen. Once you're done getting hyped up from awesome ninja cinematics, go ahead and press start to begin slashing your way through the rest of the game. If you were a kid like me and had played the Ninja Gaiden arcade game extensively at the grocery store, then playing Ninja Gaiden on the NES for the first time was a pretty big shock. The NES version is nothing like its arcade counterpart in any way, besides some stage locations and bosses. As mentioned before, the beat-em-up gameplay of the arcade has been replaced on the NES with a side-scrolling action platform game that sees you running to the left and right across stages and using your sword to slice through anything in your path. While it was initially disappointing to me that this wasn't the game I thought it would be, I really didn't care after spending just a few minutes with the super fast and responsive NES controls. Not only can your character run and jump like a true ninja, but the game also gives you the awesome ability to hang and bounce off of vertical structures like signs and walls. And while it can definitely give you a fun new way to reach platforms, it can also sometimes be a bit too sticky, with your character grappling onto the side of something when you thought you'd land on the platform instead. It's something that you get used to fairly quickly though, and afterward you should be running and bouncing around stages with the best ninjas out there. While your maneuverability and Dragon Sword are more than capable of taking out most everything in the game with one swing, you also get some help via in-game power-ups and items. The power-ups that drop are ninja stars that make long-range attacks possible, a spin attack that can be great for attacking from above, and the always useful diagonal fire attack. All of these use power from your power gauge, so it's important to know what areas are best to save them for, since they can be the difference between quickly getting through a section or throwing your NES through the nearest window. And if you think saving them through the bosses is the way to go, then you're wasting your time, since the bosses in the game are surprisingly tepid compared to the rest of the game. Most just walk back and forth, throwing out a single attack that you can easily dodge, with only a couple really mixing up that strategy very much. So definitely don't be afraid to use those power-ups in each stage when things are starting to look their hairiest, since that's probably when they're at their most useful. You can also find standard item drops around stages that activate when you touch them, like freezing time, invincibility, and health refills, but these generally don't drop enough to make them worth counting on too often. Besides that, it's up to you and your ninja skills to make it through the rest of the game. And trust me, you're gonna need all the ninja training you can get to make it through this one. If there's one complaint that Ninja Gaiden has received since it launched, it's the absolutely brutal difficulty it throws at you throughout the game. Now personally, I like a hard NES game as much as the next guy, but there are definitely parts of Ninja Gaiden that can feel unfair, almost to the point where you have to learn to trick the game so you can make it past certain areas. Obviously, you get your standard bottomless pits and enemies placed in the most annoying spots ever that most NES platformers come standard with. But what really amps up the difficulty in Ninja Gaiden is the way the enemies can constantly respawn if you go too too far back in the screen, along with how your character gets pushed back every time he gets hit. The latter will definitely have Castlevania vets reaching for their PTSD meds, but when in combination with the aforementioned respawning enemies, things can get downright impossible at times. Your best bet most of the time is to simply not kill some of the enemies, since the game won't actually respawn anything if the enemy stays on the screen, or you just get far enough for the game to forget about it and then it loads the next set of enemies. Even then though, the game is still one of the hardest on the NES, and probably shouldn't be attempted at all if you have a penchant for high blood pressure. But if you think you can deal with it, then Ninja Gaiden is as rewarding as they come when you finally do get past a section that's been making you scream at the TV for hours. If I can stop beating around the bush for a minute, Ninja Gaiden is obviously an all-time classic game that will seemingly never age. Even picking it back up for this review and playing it was like putting on an old shirt that you forgot about, but it still fits perfectly. A lot of people mention in reviews of classic games just how good they still feel, and saying that in a review isn't exactly easy to convey without putting a controller in someone else's hands and making them play it. For me, Ninja Gaiden is that one NES game that still just feels amazing to play every single time. There's a fluidity to its gameplay that just can't be matched in my opinion. And if you get into a groove, then you really do almost feel like a ninja as you barrel through enemies and jump off walls like some crazed spider monkey. Every time I pick it up, I instantly remember why it's just so damn fun. Sure, the difficulty is off the charts and can border on human torture at times, but there's so much good here with the gameplay and storytelling that I can forgive whatever shortcomings it has. So if you haven't played Ninja Gaiden in a while, or have somehow never played it, then don't think twice about picking it up. Because if there's one thing Ninja Gaiden does better than any other game out there, it's making you realize just how damn fun being a ninja can be.